Welcome to part 3 of Brolifts. We're going to create a React application in Rails, allow users to log into our application using their Google account using OAuth 2. What is OAuth 2? OAuth is an open standard authorization protocol framework that describes how unrelated servers and services can safely allow authenticated access to their assets without actually sharing the initial login credentials. To demonstrate that, here I've got BroLift with React running, Rails as the server on localhost 3000. I'm going to allow my user to log in. They click login, and if you look at the URL, it's no longer at my local host, it's at Google. So I am not handling how to get the user's information such as username or password. So at no point do I need to deal with any security issues or actually storing the username or password of this person. All I care about is that Google can say they are who they are and then give me information about that user. I'm on Google's login page. I'm going to select my user. I'm not logged in, so I'm going to type in my password. Google logged me in, redirected me back to localhost, and gave my app all the information about me, so this app knows who I am. You might be wondering, how does this work? Basically what happens is my app, it saw that this user clicked login, it calls out to Google's OAuth URL, and to kind of step back a little bit, we're going to use a gem that does all of this for us. So our code is going to be super clean. It is called OmniAuth Google OAuth 2, and basically just throw this in our gem file. It's got a little bit of setup. What I actually wanted to show is that Google themselves, there's a lot of blogs out there, but Google's docs themselves are super helpful for getting this set up. And I'm not going to actually in this video go step by step, but Google has great docs. I'll put links to it in the description. You can follow it on your own, or you can just pull the code and look at it yourself. But I basically followed this step by step and was able to do what I just showed, where I was able to log into my app using my Google account. So I'm using this gem, followed these docs, and I got all this set up. Okay, so back to my app. It calls out to Google OAuth. There's a URL in that gem. I give it a client ID and a secret that Google gives me. So I've made a Google account for this app. I generated a secret and I told them who I am. So I've configured that in my Rails application. So I call out to this URL with those two pieces of information. Google gives me a one-time token and a one-time secret to call back to them. So I've called them. They've sent me back to my app with this information. I'm going to go call them again. And so I take these token and secret, I call back to Google with a URL that's configured in the gem, and then the user then has to log in. Once they log in, like you saw, I typed in my password, I logged in. Google takes that information, approves it, generates a new token, goes back to my app with that user and that token. So now I have an authenticated user, I've got a token, and then I call back to Google again. I get their username, if I want it, their email, their profile image. In this case, you can see my name in my profile image. So, just to recap, we're going back and forth like 4 times, generating tokens and secrets and back and forth. But to the user, it is pretty seamless. And now that I'm logged in, let's go ahead and log out. And let's log in. Let's see what that looks like again. Boom. Nothing needed to happen, because I was already logged into Google. It knows who I am, and it just sent me right back. So like, I have this token, and I can just log out and log in all day. And also, it allows users to not have to create a new username or a new crazy password. And you know how difficult it is. Like, these websites have like 20 different restrictions, and certain websites it has to be like 10 characters, and some has to be 20, and sometimes you have to have a like special character, and some don't allow special characters. Kind of sucks. So in this way, I'm not making the user have to go through that frustrating process of creating a username and password and the whole setup process. They just log in with their Google account. Sweet, I got access to this app now. So that's the authentication of the user. So that's super cool. What does that look like in our code? So like I said, I'm using that gem, and The gem will allow the going back and forth generating tokens without me actually having to write anything. But what I need to do is, once my user's logged in, Google sent me back, I need to take that information, create a user account in my app. I've already went ahead, I've created a sessions controller. And basically what happens is, let me open up the routes and show you when Google calls back. There is a login URL, which is going to redirect to here. This is part of the gem. You can log out, which allows me to destroy my session and display a login, and then that login can send them back to login. And then there's this cool callback. So that's the final one. I've got my token from Google, the user's logged in, and I want to get my information. Once I give them this token, they call back. So I'm going to call sessions create. Let's go back to our sessions controller, and in here, Google's called back to me, sent me all the information about the user that they have approved or I have requested. It's in the request env. It's kind of like hidden behind the scenes for security purposes, but we have access to it in our code. We can call our user model, and I created a method called create from OAuth. It's similar to in Google Docs. You'll end up doing this. So if I go to my model, I pass in that auth information. I'm going to find a new user and initialize it if it doesn't exist. So I'm basically keying the user's identity off their email. I don't need anything else to have a unique user at this point because I'm only going to allow people to log in with Google, and Google is already handling unique identities via email. So I say, find the user where their email is equal to the one they've logged in with. Either find that user if they've already logged in, or initialize a new user in my database. And then I've got a unique ID, I've got their name, email, and their image. And that's all I care or need about a user for them to use my app. So let's go back to the sessions controller again. I've got my secret information from Google. I've created a user account. And then I save that user. So now they're saved in my database. I can do what I want with this user. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a cookie, an encrypted cookie. I'm going to put their user ID in there, and I'm going to make it expire in 7 days. So what this essentially is doing is saying create or find my user, give them a session in this specific browser that's valid for 7 days, and send them back to the home page, which is the root path. And then quickly, let's talk about when you click logout, what actually happens. We're not doing anything at Google, so you're still logged into Google. But for my app, I am going to go ahead and delete this cookie. So if you refresh the page, you're not logged in anymore. Okay, so that's how we're going to log in our users, why we're going to do it this way, how we're going to do it this way. And then let's go into React. We're using Rails, and we're going to use Rails to manage our sessions for our users so our front end doesn't have to do it. And then we're also going to use Rails Webpacker and React to do something super cool. So I'm going to go into my home page, which is home index, and I have installed, let me show you my gem file real quick. I have installed Webpacker React, and this is going to be super cool. I highly recommend you install this in any of your new applications you're building with Rails and React. So what it does is it allows me to create a pack, put a component in my pack, and then link to it directly, but also pass in information into my React app through the DOM. So the DOM's going to pick it up, pass it as props to my React application. So in this case, Rails is going to manage my user and their whole session, and then give it to React whenever a user refreshes a page. So I've got a home page. I'll show you what this string means here. And then I've got this hash, which is going to get converted into a JavaScript object and then passed into the DOM. So I'm going to boot my home page, and it's already going to know who my user is, so I don't need to do any front-end stuff to manage sessions. So like I was saying before, we've got a pack that we're expecting to create this React app to make it available in this React component through Webpacker React. By default, when you boot up a Rails app, it's going to have a application.js pack, and it's going to pull in this hello React and if you've done this before, you've seen this. This is the default one. I'm going to go ahead and delete this because I've already created a new one. But I just wanted to show you that Application.js and Hello React is in there by default when you tell Rails to create a React application. So we're going to come in here and see how I'm importing, like the ES6 syntax to import a component. I'm importing my homepage and I'm calling it homepage, and that links up with my string here as homepage. So I could import multiple things in multiple views, have whole different React applications. But in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have one homepage and then have like a single page app inside of that homepage. So I've got my homepage. It calls this homepage, which I'm going to talk about my folder structure here of how I generally do React apps. And then I've got a homepage, which is home index. And then basically I'm doing my standard React code here. And I've got my user being passed in. From the view here, you can see I've got name, image URL, logged in. That's all getting passed in as props. And then I'm passing them to my component just like this. And it works pretty seamlessly. And I can not only pass in the user, but I could pass in any backend information without my front end having to go fetch it. So as soon as it boots, it has this information. And that's super cool for when you have your front end and your back end all in one app. So why don't I go ahead and start by talking about each one of these folders and what we're going to use them for. And the reason I did this ahead of time is because there's a lot here and I want to spend some time talking about each one, because on the next video we're going to build this, and as you can see, there's going to require a lot of Reactness to happen and Redux to happen to be able to do this. And I just want to have this pre-set up so when we go in the next video we can jump right in and go full on front end and hit those APIs we built in the last video. So we've got components. What this is going to be is it's going to be generic components that I want to reuse in different places in my app. So this is a shared folder across multiple pages. You might call this shared or something else in your application, but it's generally at the root of your source, or in this case we're in Rails, so it's an app JavaScript. It's usually at the root of your app. We've got HOC, and what that stands for is higher order components. It's a React way of extending components so I can share props between multiple ones without having to copy and paste code. And it does a bunch of other things, which we'll get into later, but we got packs. This is a Rails thing. You won't really see this in any other like strictly front-end apps. But like I was saying before, this is where we're going to register Webpacker React components that we can pull into our view. We've got our pages. So in this case, we've got a home page. Later, we're going to build a lift tracker page. Then we've got Redux. Redux is going to be for us to have a global state across all of our components. If you're not familiar with that, I would recommend kind of just doing a little bit of research, because we're going to use it very heavily in our application. And we're going to use React, Redux, and Thunk flow for processing backend calls and managing state. We got services. In there, we're going to put a place for us to call all of our APIs. And then we got utilities. This is like if you've ever used Lodash or a helper library to kind of do like one-off processing that you don't want to have in your component, or you want to reuse something that does like some special math operations, some special business logic. You'll put that in utilities and then you'll pull that into your other components. So that's kind of the folder structure we're going to use to build our application. And then there's one other thing I want to talk about in this video. Well, actually two other things. One is, what are all the React libraries we're going to use to build our application? And then two is, I want to show you the actual code that we used for this. So let's hop into our package.json. Okay, so we've got our package.json open. It looks kind of small because it is, but we're going to do a lot with these few libraries. I'm going to go through what's like defaulted in Rails, and then what I've added for not just building this, but also what we're going to use in the future. So we've got Babel, preset React. That comes with Rails, so does Rails Webpacker. I've added Axios, and that's going to be for us to make HTTP calls. We could use fetch, but I want to use this because it's a little bit cleaner syntax for making HTTP calls. This Babel plugin for prop types, that's by defaulted with Rails. We got Bootstrap, so we're going to use Bootstrap because we want super quick, easy way to have some components. And if you're not familiar with Bootstrap, it started off as like a UI library that like every website used when it first came out, and every website looked the same. And so some companies or some people kind of hate Bootstrap, but we're going to use it because it has a lot of default components such as navigation and buttons and drop downs. It has all of that built in for us, and we don't have to do any styling or any extra building a whole bunch of React components. We got prop types. So if I quickly, I'll hop into prop types later and describe what they are, but that comes with, it does come with Rails and React. React obviously is going to come with it. Got React Bootstrap. React DOM comes with it. Redux I've added to manage global state like I talked about before. React Router, that's for us to have, like I was saying before, I'm going to have one page as a single page app, and it's going to have multiple routes, but I'm not going to do that in Rails. I'm just going to do that in the front end. And I'll show you some cool magic to have multiple routes, so if a user refreshes their page, it still goes to the front end even though it looks like a backend route. Redux, Thunk, like I talked about before. Styled components. We might not use this a bunch because we're using Bootstrap, but I absolutely love styled components. And this allows you to have CSS in your JavaScript, which kind of sounds gross, but it comes to be super helpful for not only just clean code, but like having everything all in one place. So it's easy to edit CSS or figure out where your CSS is and modularize it. And then we've got Webpacker React, and that's just like I was talking about before of how we have got this available and how my React knows what's happening. So that's it for our dependencies. We're going to do a lot with this. I might add one or two more things in here, but that's kind of like the core React functionality that we're going to have for a lot of episodes going forward. And the last thing I want to do is I want to actually show you what I've done like in depth to build this page. So I imported a navbar from React. I've imported a nav, an image, and a nav dropdown. So navbar is this black area here. I've specified that I want it variant dark and the background dark. And then what's really cool that I've really liked about Bootstrap versus other front-end libraries is that it has dot notation inside of here. So if I want to pull in a brand, it's not a whole nother component, so I'm not importing 1,000 things or having the syntax where I'm like import A, B, C, D, and then trying to find in here which one I've removed or added at some point. So that's pretty cool that I've actually noticed that, and I've liked that about Bootstrap. I wish other libraries would do that. And what that comes with, actually, Navbar, I've got my brand, so we've got BroLift here, which is a link, which is cool because it's got href on there. I've got toggle, which we can't see, but if we're in mobile mode, that will allow us to have a mobile navbar. I've got a collapsible area, which means this whole thing on mobile will look totally different. I've got the actual nav inside of here, so this area on the right. And in here, I can check to see if my user's logged in, and I'll handle showing the login or the log out and showing the user's information. I'm using a React fragment, which comes with React, which means I've got two siblings and no parent. And I could just throw a div here, but I don't need needless HTML, and that's what you used to have to do in older versions of React. Just throw like a span or div or whatever here. But React fragment has been awesome since they've added it. In here, it's got a title, which I'm putting the name of the user. So again, we've got prop types here. So Like I was saying when I was talking about the package.json, I'm using prop types to define what I expect my components to pass in. This is not useful for me building this by myself, but if I had a whole bunch of other people working on this, it's nice for somebody who's working on something they didn't touch before to know, how does this component even work? And if it's a giant component, which I hope it's not, but it could be, it'd be nice to know everything that's getting passed in, what's required, what the types are. It's pretty cool. And then you can have default props here. So obviously login false. So when the page loads, it defaults to the person not being logged in. And then if they are and this prop changes, it'll update and you can see your updates. I've got my, so again, title of this nav area is my name. And it's a nav dropdown. So it throws this caret on here. I didn't have to do it. So I can click this. I've got a log out here. And here's my nav.item, which has an href, just like an anchor would. And here's the text for that. And then I've pulled in an image. So you might go, I thought it was IMG. No, Bootstrap has a cool library to render images. So in here I've put height 30. It's actually way bigger. I've made it so it fits here just by using a height prop. Gave it the URL that Google gave me. I stored it in the database, passed it to my front end. And then I've told it I wanted a rounded circle because that's how Google stores our images. And that's it. Let's talk about the next episode. We're going to do strictly front end on the next episode. We're going to build these components here. We're going to have a muscle group selector and an equipment selector, which is going to filter out the exercises because there's going to be over 1,000 exercises. We're going to have a way for you to manage your sets so you can add multiple, remove multiple at any point, and it keeps track of the order, because I need to keep my order as set 1, set 2, set 3, even though I've added more and I'm keeping track of an index and it might change because you might delete in the middle. Ability to add notes, and then we might have time to get to go to next exercise where we'll completely wipe this out, store it in Redux, and then reset it for the user to go to their next exercise. Alright, I hope you all have enjoyed it. If you're liking this series, it super helps me for you to leave a like. Leave a comment if you want me to cover anything more in depth, like if you actually want me to show you how that OAuth is configured in my app, or if you want to see more about React, just leave a comment down below. And if you think somebody else could learn something like this, feel free to share it. That's all. I hope you all have a great day.